The Day Boston Drowned in Molasses. A true story that sounds almost impossible, but happened. Prologue. A sweet beginning with a dark ending. Imagine a quiet January afternoon in Boston. Children laughing near the waterfront, horses pulling heavy carts on cobblestone streets, the sweet, thick smell of molasses drifting through the air. No one could have guessed that in just a few minutes, this peaceful day would turn into one of the strangest and most devastating disasters in American history. On January 15, 1919, Boston didn't flood with water. It drowned in molasses. A wave of thick, hot syrup, 25 feet high and moving faster than a man could run, rushed through the city's north end, crushing buildings, drowning people, killing horses, and leaving behind a sticky nightmare that would haunt the city for years. This is not a legend. It's not a movie plot. It's a true story, one of the most bizarre industrial disasters in U.S. history. Chapter 1. The Tank That Shouldn't Have Been. In the early 1900s, America was changing. The country was buzzing with energy, ambition, and industry. The First World War had just ended. The economy was growing fast. And in Boston, the waterfront was alive with ships, factories, and the scent of opportunity. At the center of this new industrial wave was molasses. This thick, sweet syrup wasn't just for cookies and candy. In those days, molasses was also used to produce industrial alcohol, which was turned into munitions and other products, especially during wartime. The U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company, USIA, wanted to take advantage of this booming demand. So in 1915, they built a massive storage tank on Boston's Commercial Street, right next to a busy residential neighborhood full of Italian immigrant families. The tank was enormous, 50 feet tall, 90 feet wide, a capacity of 2.3 million gallons of molasses. But there was a problem. The tank wasn't built safely. Workers weren't required to get engineering certifications. No government inspector checked it. The steel walls were thinner than they should have been, and the rivets that held it together were cheap. Even worse, the tank was rushed into use before it was even painted. Why paint it? Because paint would have helped hide leaks. And soon after construction, locals began to hear the tank groan. Every day, molasses leaked through the rivets, forming sticky puddles on the ground. Children from the neighborhood came with tin cups to collect the syrup that dripped down. Some even climbed the tank and played around it. The company knew it was leaking, but instead of fixing it, they simply painted the tank brown, hoping no one would notice. They were hiding a bomb made of syrup. Chapter 2. Boston, a city on edge. The early months of 1919 were tense in America. The First World War had just ended. Anti-immigrant sentiment was growing. Labor strikes were spreading. Rumors of anarchists and radicals were everywhere. The Boston North End was home to many Italian immigrants. They worked hard in factories, lived in crowded apartments, and struggled to make ends meet. Many didn't trust big companies, and they especially didn't trust the government. Meanwhile, prohibition was on the horizon. The U.S. government was moving toward banning alcohol entirely. This meant companies like USIA were desperate to produce and sell as much industrial alcohol as possible before the new laws hit. In early January, a huge shipment of molasses arrived in Boston. The company pumped 2.3 million gallons into the tank, more than it had ever held before. Some workers reported creaks and popping sounds. The tank seemed to bulge slightly. A few employees told their bosses they were worried. The bosses laughed. "It's just molasses," they said. "What's the worst that can happen?" Chapter 3. The day the syrup exploded. January 15th, 1919, 12:30 p.m. It was a chilly winter day, but warmer than usual for January. The temperature had risen quickly over the past 24 hours, which meant the molasses inside the tank was expanding. Children were playing outside. Workers were unloading cargo. Horses were tied to wagons. The city was busy, but calm. Then it happened. Bang! A sound like machine gun fire echoed through the streets. Some thought a train had derailed. Others thought it was a bomb, but it was neither. The tank split open with a thunderous roar. The rivets shot out like bullets, and a massive wall of molasses burst into the neighborhood. Eyewitnesses described it as a dark brown wave, 25 feet high and moving at 35 miles per hour. It was so powerful that it lifted a train off its tracks, flattened entire buildings, and knocked people off their feet as if they were toys. One firefighter said it looked like a wave of black death. Chapter 4. A City Under Syrup. The force of the explosion was unimaginable. The elevated railway near the tank twisted like paper. A police patrol wagon was lifted and thrown into a building. Horses were swallowed by the syrup and never seen again. The Boston Fire Department Engine 31 station, located right next to the tank, was crushed. Firefighters inside were trapped. People who tried to run found their feet stuck in the sticky molasses. Some were sucked down like quicksand. Those who fell couldn't get up again. The waves surged through the streets, flooding basements, filling cellars, and pushing entire buildings off their foundations. It traveled more than 2 blocks in minutes. The noise was deafening, but soon the noise faded, replaced by cries for help. "It's like trying to swim in glue," one survivor later said. Chapter 5. Heroes in the Stickiness. Within minutes, first responders rushed to the scene, but their job was nearly impossible. The molasses was thick and heavy. Every step was a struggle. Rescuers had to wade through waist-deep syrup. Horses pulling wagons to help rescue victims got stuck themselves. The Boston Police Department, firefighters, Red Cross workers, soldiers, and hundreds of volunteers formed human chains to pull survivors out. They cut through collapsed buildings, used boats to float over the syrup, and even brought in pumps to try to remove the molasses. Some people were trapped for hours. One young boy was rescued after being submerged for almost 4 hours. Others weren't so lucky. By the end of the day, 21 people were dead. 150 were injured. Dozens of horses died. Hundreds lost their homes. Boston looked like a battlefield. Chapter 6. The Aftermath of Sweet Destruction. When the wave finally settled, Boston was coated in 2 feet of molasses. The city smelled sickly sweet. The syrup hardened overnight, turning into something like concrete. Cleanup crews had to use salt water and sand to try to wash it away. It took 87,000 man-hours to clean the city. Workers tracked molasses on their boots, and soon it spread everywhere, to offices, to trains, even as far as the harbor. For months, Boston smelled like molasses. But the physical mess was just the beginning. Chapter 7. The Courtroom Battle. The victims and their families were furious. They filed lawsuits against the United States Industrial Alcohol Company. This became one of the largest class action lawsuits in U.S. history at that time. The company argued it wasn't their fault. They blamed anarchists. In 1919, anarchist bombings were common, and they claimed radicals had blown up the tank. But investigators didn't buy it. There was no sign of explosives. Leaks had been reported for years, and the steel was too thin. The real cause was negligence.
The tank had been built cheaply with no proper engineering oversight. The trial lasted 5 years. Thousands of pages of testimony were recorded. In the end, the company was found liable. They had to pay more than $600,000 in damages, roughly $10 million in today's money. Families received around $7,000 per victim. The case changed American engineering standards forever.
Chapter 8. Lessons Written in Syrup. The Great Molasses Flood might sound funny today. People joke about it, imagine rivers of syrup, and laugh. But it was a serious tragedy. 21 people died. A neighborhood was destroyed. And it exposed a dark truth about corporate greed and lack of regulation in early 20th century America. After the disaster, cities across the country introduced building safety regulations. Tanks like the one in Boston could no longer be built without proper inspections and engineering review. This event became a turning point for industrial safety, just like other disasters of the era, such as the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York. Chapter 9. Boston Remembers. Today, more than a century later, the site of the molasses disaster looks peaceful. There's a small plaque on Commercial Street, near where the tank once stood. If you walk by on a hot summer day, locals sometimes say you can still smell molasses in the air. The story has become part of Boston's identity, strange, tragic, and unforgettable. It's taught in schools, documented in museums, and remembered by historians as one of the most unusual disasters in U.S. history. But it's more than a curiosity. It's a reminder that behind every strange story, there are real lives, real pain, and real consequences. Epilogue. A wave that changed history. The Great Molasses Flood wasn't just a freak accident. It was the product of greed, haste, and arrogance. A belief that cutting corners wouldn't matter. But it did. The victims of that day forced a powerful company to face justice. And in doing so, they made America safer. So next time you drizzle molasses on a pancake or stir it into a recipe, remember, once upon a time, molasses drowned a city, and history never forgot.